Good day, everyone. I'm Alnajer M. Ulo, a Teacher 1 at Schools Division of Isabela City, teaching at Isabela East Central Elementary School, your presenter for today in PhD 300 with the description of Advanced Educational Research, under with the facilitator of Dr. Benjir Ariola. Today, we are going to discuss about sampling. Okay, what is sampling? Sampling is a technique of selecting individual members or a subset of the population to make statistical inferences from them and estimate the characteristics of the whole population. Different sampling methods are widely used by researchers in market research so that they do not need to research the entire population to collect actionable. Meaning to say, sampling is an essential part of any research project. The right sampling method can make or break the validity of your research, and it's essential to choose the right method for your specific question. It is also time-convenient and cost-effective method and hence forms the basis of any research design. Sampling techniques can be used in research survey software for optimum derivation. So sampling in education is a crucial aspect of research, allowing researchers to study a small group, the sample, to draw conclusions about a larger group, the population. This is particularly important in education where studying every student or every school might be impractical or impossible. Now let's proceed with probability sampling techniques. Probability sampling techniques are those where every member of the population has a known chance of being selected for the sample. So this helps the sample is representative of the population, making it possible to generalize findings to the broader group. Now let's start first with random sampling. Okay, what do you mean by random sampling? So in random sampling, every individual in the population has an equal chance of being selected as being shown in the picture. So this is considered the gold standard for sampling as it minimizes bias. So, example, a researcher wants to study the effectiveness of a new reading program in a large school district. So they randomly select 100 students from this district to participate in the study, ensuring that every student has an equal chance of being chosen. Next, let's proceed to stratified sampling. Okay, stratified sampling divides the population into subgroups, strata, based on specific characteristics such as gender, ethnicity, or socio-economic status. Then, a random sample is taken from each stratum, ensuring proportional representation of each group in the sample, as you can see in the picture shown below. So for example, a researcher wants to study the impact of a new math curriculum on student performance. They divide the population of students into 3 strata based on their socio-economic status: low, middle, and high. So they then randomly select 50 students from each stratum, ensuring that the sample reflects the socio-economic makeup of the school district. Okay, next, let's proceed with cluster sampling. Cluster sampling is used when the population is naturally divided into clusters, such as schools or classrooms. The researcher randomly selects a certain number of clusters and then includes all individuals within those selected clusters in the sample. For example, a researcher wants to study the effectiveness of a new science curriculum in large school district. So they randomly select 10 schools from the district and then include all students in those 10 schools in the sample. Okay, next, let's proceed with systematic sampling. In systematic sampling, it involves selecting every ninth individual from a list of the population. The starting point is chosen randomly, and then every ninth individual is selected after that, as you can see in the picture shown there. So, for example, a researcher wants to study the attitudes of students towards a new school policy. They obtain a list of all students in the school and randomly select a starting point. So they then select every 10 student on the list to participate in the study. Now, let's proceed to non-probability sampling techniques. In non-probability sampling techniques, it involves selecting a sample based on subjective judgment or convenience rather than randomly selection. So while these techniques are not as statistically rigorous as probability sampling, they can be useful in certain situations, particularly when studying specific populations or conducting exploratory research. Okay, there are four non-probability sampling techniques. So let's start with number one, convenience sampling. Okay, a convenience sampling involves selecting participants based on their accessibility or ease of recruitment. So this is often the easiest and least expensive sampling method, but it can introduce bias as the sample may not be representative of the population. So for example, a researcher wants to study the opinions of teachers on a new teaching method. So they recruit participants from a nearby school where they have easy access, but this sample may not accurately reflect the opinions of teachers in other schools or districts. Next, let's proceed with the purposive sampling. In a purposive sampling, also known as judgmental sampling, involves selecting participants based on specific criteria related to the research question. So this is often used in qualitative research when the researcher wants to gain in-depth understanding from individuals with specific experiences or knowledge. Okay, for example, a researcher wants to study the experiences of students who have been bullied. So they select participants who have been identified as having experienced bullying, so ensuring they get detailed insights from those directly affected. Next, let's proceed with quota sampling. In a quota sampling aims to create a sample that mirrors the population in terms of specific characteristics such as gender, ethnicity, or age. So in this sampling techniques, the researcher sets quotas for each group and then selects participants to meet those quotas. For example, a researcher wants to study the attitudes of students towards a new school uniform policy. They know that the school population is 60% female and 40% male. So they select 60 female students and 40 male students to participate in the study, ensuring the sample reflects the gender distribution of the school. Okay, now let's proceed to the last one, which is the snowball sampling. In a snowball sampling is used when the population is difficult to reach or identify. The researcher starts with a small group of individuals who meet the criteria and then asks them to refer other individuals who also meet the criteria. So this method can be particularly useful for studying marginalized or hidden populations. So for example, A researcher wants to study the experiences of undocumented immigrants in a particular city. So they start by interviewing a few undocumented immigrants they know and then ask those individuals to refer them to other undocumented immigrants they know. So that's all about the non-probability sampling techniques. In this, um, in conclusion, sampling is an essential part of educational research, allowing researchers to gather data from a smaller group to draw conclusions about a larger population. Choosing the appropriate sampling technique depends on the research question, the population being studied, and the resources available. Understanding the strengths and limitations of different sampling methods is crucial for ensuring the validity and generalizability of research findings. Sampling errors and biases are two common issues that can arise in research, particularly when studying a population using a sample. While they are often used interchangeably, they have distinct meanings and implications for the reliability and validity of research findings. So now, let's proceed to the sampling error. Okay, what about the sampling error? So sampling error is the difference between the characteristics of a sample and the characteristics of the population from which it was drawn. So it occurs due to the inherent randomness of sampling, where the sample may not perfectly reflect the population. This error is unavoidable unless the entire population is studied, which is often impractical. So for example, a researcher wants to estimate the average height of all students in a school. So they randomly select 50 students from the school and calculate the average height of the sample. However, this sample may not perfectly represent the entire school population, and the average height of the sample may be slightly higher or lower than the true average height of all students in the school. So this difference is due to sampling. Okay, now let's proceed to the key points and about sampling error. Number one, it is a random error because it occurs due to chance variation in the selection of the sample. Number two, it can be estimated. So sampling error can be calculated using statistical methods, providing an indication of the margin of error associated with the sample results. And the last one, it can be reduced by increasing sample size. So a larger sample size generally reduces sampling error as it provides a more accurate representation of the population. Okay, now let's proceed to sampling bias. Okay, a sampling bias occurs when the sample is not representative of the population due to a systematic error in the sampling process. This means that certain individuals or groups within the population are more likely to be included in the sample than others, leading to skewed or distorted results. So for example, a researcher wants to study the opinions of students on a new school policy, so they decide to conduct a survey by distributing questionnaires in the school cafeteria during lunchtime. However, this method may introduce bias as students who are not present at lunchtime, such as those who have lunch off campus or who are involved in extracurricular activities, are less likely to be included in the sample. So, here are the key points about sampling biases. So, number one, it is a systematic error. So, why it is a systematic error? Because it occurs due to flaws in the sampling method itself, leading to a non-random selection of participants. Next one, it can be difficult to detect. So sampling bias can be subtle and may not be apparent until after the data has been collected. And the last one, it can be minimized by using appropriate sampling techniques. Choosing the right sampling technique, such as random sampling or stratified sampling, can help reduce the risk of sampling bias. Now, let's proceed to the types of sampling bias. So, there are several types of sampling bias, including selection bias. So, in selection bias occurs when the selection of participants is not random or representative of the population. Next, non-response bias occurs when individuals who do not respond to the survey or study systematically differ from those who do. Next, undercoverage bias occurs when certain groups within the population are underrepresented in the sample. And the last one, self-selection bias occurs when participants volunteer to participate in the study, potentially leading to a biased sample. So in conclusion, sampling errors and biases are important considerations in research. Understanding the difference between them is crucial for ensuring the reliability and validity of research findings. By being aware of these potential issues and using appropriate sampling techniques, researchers can minimize the impact of both sampling errors and biases, leading to more accurate and reliable conclusions. Next, let's proceed to determining sample size for educational administration research. So in determining the appropriate sample size for educational administration research is crucial for ensuring the reliability and generalizability of your findings. So the ideal sample size depends on several factors, including the research question, the population being studied, and the desired level of precision. This response will explore key considerations and methods for determining sample size in educational administration. So these are the importance of sample size in educational administration research. So a well-calculated sample size is essential for several reasons. So number one is validity. So why validity? Because an adequate sample size ensures the study results accurately reflect the population of interest, enhancing internal validity by producing precise estimates of population parameters. So reliability, a larger sample size reduces the risk of random sampling errors, increasing the reliability of research findings. Next, a statistical significance, because accurate sample sizes ensure is sufficient power to detect statistically significant differences or relationships between variables. Next, cost effectiveness. Using the most accurate sample size possible saves resources and time, particularly important in educational administration research due to budget limitations. And the last one, generalizability. A broad sample size allows for external validity by facilitating the application of research findings to other contexts and populations. Next, let's proceed to the factors to consider when determining sample size. So here are the following. So several factors influence the appropriate sample size for educational administration research. So number one is population size. So why population size? The target population should be considered to ensure the study is representative. Larger populations generally require larger sample sizes. Next, variability. If the population has high variability, which is often the case in educational administration research, larger sample sizes are required to reduce sampling error. Next, confidence level and interval. So researchers should define a desired confidence level and interval to indicate the level of precision they seek in their study results. Next, effect size. The expected size of this effect of this study aims to estimate should be considered when determining sample size. So larger expected effects require smaller sample sizes. Next, methodology. The type of research design and analytical methods used can impact the required sample size for the study. For example, complex designs or multivariate analysis may require larger sample sizes. Next, resource constraints. So, in a resource constraints, budget, time, and other restrictions may affect the feasibility of achieving the desired sample. That's it for my presentations. Thank you for listening.
Living life